Back home now, Labor is expected to keep stage 3 tax cuts that will benefit high and middle income earners in the October budget, despite mounting pressure to dump or cap the policy. The Prime Minister insists the government's position hasn't changed, but the tax debate isn't over yet, with the government deferring the fight to next year's May budget, when Australians could be feeling inflation impacts the worst. Joining us live now is Nationals leader, David Littleproud. David Littleproud, thank you for your time this morning. Is the Prime Minister being transparent here? Do you believe that stage 3 tax cuts will be kept as promised?
Well, not if he can help it. I mean, he sent Jim Chalmers out to fly the kite to see what he could get away with. You just simply cannot trust Labor with tax cuts. These aren't tax cuts for the big end of town. This is for middle income earners. 45,000 to 200,000 will get a tax cut that lower income earners we gave to. It's staged. It's not coming until 2024. All the headwinds that Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese are talking about in terms of global issues and the conflict in Ukraine, they were there before the election. Everyone knew what was coming. And they voted for this in the Parliament. And this is why the Australians get jacker politicians, when they go and promise the world to them leading up to an election, and then straight after it, they say, oh, well, look, we found a reason why not to do it. You will erode trust to the Australian people if Anthony Albanese doesn't square up with this. He doesn't look the Australian people in the eye and follow through on this. But what I fear is this is just the beginning of the start of taxation under this mob. They're unable in the Parliament to even be able to articulate that they won't increase taxes on superannuants, those in family trusts, that use it as a legitimate vehicle to make sure they have investment and in terms of succession of their businesses and farms. So this government has made it very clear that they're trying to wrangle themselves out of commitments that they voted for on the floor of Parliament, but then look to go further. And this is where you've got to get your priorities right as a government. You prioritise about supplying the services you need, but then ultimately whatever's left over should go back into the Australian people's pockets, because we believe that they know how to spend that better than a bureaucrat in Canberra.
What about deferring the details of the stage 3 tax cuts to next May's budget? Do you think that's probably the best move?
Well, it's tricky. And this is all it is Jim Chalmers is being tricky and sneaky instead of being upfront. They can give an LAW law commitment to these tax cuts. This is Anthony Albanese's LAW law commitment. This is his LAW law tax cut moment. And then if he doesn't follow through on it, if he doesn't give the Australian people that commitment today, then he's failed. He's no better than what Paul Keating did to the Australian public. He's promised them the world and delivered nothing. And this is a defining moment for this government and this Prime Minister to make sure that he can clearly articulate that this is a LAW law tax cut. Otherwise, the Australian people will rightfully have been sold a pup and they will rightfully be upset.
OK, looking at the budget, new budget analysis has revealed that major defence projects are running significantly over budget. Richard Marles has blamed the former government for chaotic administration. Does he have a point?
Oh, I think this is something that's been going on for decades of politicians and governments of all political persuasions. It's a cultural issue within defence that I think Peter Dutton was trying to change, and ministers of the past of both political persuasion have tried to change. I mean, we've seen procurement of assets that don't meet our standards and aren't fit for future or fit for purpose. I mean, we saw helicopters purchased that you couldn't have a machine gunner sitting out the side of. I mean, these are the sort of things that the Defence Department should be held to account. Those in the procurement should be held to account. It's a cultural issue that I think ministers of all political persuasions need to address rather than trying to make it into a political attack point. They should be looking at the cultural deficiencies in with defence and particularly procurement, and making sure those that make these decisions that cost the Australian taxpayer billions of dollars for assets that aren't fit for purpose should be held for account. You would be held to account if you're in the private sector, and so too should you if you're in defence procurement, if you make these decisions that the Australian taxpayer pays for.
OK, look, parts of New South Wales are experiencing major flooding again. Farmers are struggling. How can we support those who are badly affected, and where can we be doing better?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to understand the trauma that will be coming through some of the minds of those, particularly in northern New South Wales, that have just endured one of the worst floods in living memory. So it's important that we understand that. We give them mental support in making sure that they're prepared. But, you know, as a government, we've already put in place hundreds of millions of dollars in mitigation works, partnering with states, and it's important we continue to do that. I think this is where the mitigation works can also look to these things called dams. $7.4 billion worth of infrastructure spend on dams alone, not just to store it and to be used for agriculture, but to mitigate against flooding. That's just common sense. And if there is any reason for us to continue to build dams, particularly in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland, well, these weather events are exactly that. And this is where states need to get on board. The federal government has been prepared to pay for it. They have to simply burn the diesel, dig the holes, store the water, mitigate for these households well into the future. That's common sense, and that's why the federal government should continue to commit in this budget the money that we set aside, the $7.4 billion for dams, and then the states should get on with the job of building them.
Okay, look, finally, you've been on a national regional listening tour since Sky News last spoke to you to really learn from voters who left the party, who didn't vote for the Nats at the last election. What have you learnt from the tour?
Yeah, it's been really constructive, and I've got to say we learned a lot and listened. The themes really do come back to those impediments in regional rural Australia about getting a workforce. They want the ag visa and they want a regional visa that'll bring new migrants to regional Australia and give them the greatest gift Australians can give, which is citizenship over a period of time if they commit. But it's also about getting families back to work who want to get back to work. It's not about childcare cost here. It's actually about availability. And this is the issue that the government needs to understand. They're going to spend billions of dollars in trying to bring down childcare prices, but that's all well and good. But if you're in regional rural Australia, you can't get a childcare place. You can't get back into the workforce.
Sorry
so
to
these are the
interrupt,
types of practical challenges.
A bit tight with time. I did want to find out from you. You did lose a lot of young and female voters at the last election. Did you find out why they stopped voting for the Nats?
I think that they didn't hear the message that we were talking about, whether it be around looking after women, the billions of dollars that we put into it, and looking at the practical tactile measures like actually childcare, but for young people, the practical measures that we're putting in place now and advocating for, like small-scale modular nuclear. We didn't get to the heart of being able to articulate how we would be able to achieve a lot of these things that are important to both young people and women. And I've got to say, I think from the conversations I had, particularly with young people, they were very excited about the emerging technology of small-scale modular nuclear technology.
Okay,
and
so
that's exciting.
Do you think you need to change your policies or just your messaging?
Well, our policy always has been for small-scale modular nuclear. The National Party has been more advanced than our coalition partner, and I'm proud to say that we've now brought the Liberal Party to a juncture where we want to start that conversation with the Australian public to bring them into our trust and into the nation's trust of deciding what their energy mix should be. This government is refusing to do that. First thing I did was write to the Prime Minister saying, let's have a National Energy Summit. They ignored it. Australians should decide what their energy mix is, and particularly like young people that can see technology as the solution and can see what SMR technology will do and the emerging technology that will reduce our emissions but give us firming power is important. And this is why I think we're in a sweet spot now of being able to continue to articulate that and engage with young people, particularly on nuclear and women on the practical issues of childcare or even superannuation caps in supporting families that stay home and work. So those are the types of practical measures that the Nationals will continue to work through. And we want to go back and make sure that we road test this again with further policy and continue to have that conversation, because ultimately that's what all politicians should be doing. And I think at times we've lost sight of that, and it's important we do that properly now and they feel engaged and we bring them on that journey.
Okay, David Littleproud, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time this morning.